So taking our Vision Line Big Boy out of the box, when we open the package, this is what you're going to see. Your owner's manual, which you want to make sure that you read because there's a lot of new features on this Vision Line Big Boy that don't exist on other locomotives. Reading that manual will really help you understand how to activate all of those cool new features. Once we carefully remove the styrofoam top, what we see is the sensor track and the DB9 starter cable. Each one of these items have their own instruction manuals inside of them. Also in the package, you will receive your smoke shroud specific to the Big Boy Vision Line Big Boy locomotive, a bag with replacement traction tires, and your non-functioning front coupler, the wrench for taking out your side rod screws to replace traction tires, locomotive engine memory module, which is specific to the road name and road number of your Vision Big Boy locomotive. You'll also find enclosed in a separate bag is the whistle casting that goes on the boiler. This comes off to allow you to put smoke fluid in, so make sure that you don't lose that whistle. It's held onto the boiler with a magnet. Also included is the smoke fluid pipette. And of course your tender and your locomotive. When you remove this locomotive from the box, we strongly suggest that you use two hands. Grab the locomotive just below the walkways and lift it straight up out of the packaging. Place it on a flat surface and unwrap the locomotive accordingly. Same thing with the tender, two hands, take it out of the box, and that's how you unpack your Big Boy. The Vision Big Boy locomotive is equipped with several new features that no other legacy locomotive has. We'll go through a quick rundown of what these new features are. There's a smoke unit for each independent stack here in the front. So there's a smoke unit that drives this stack, and there's a separate smoke unit that drives this stack. They puff smoke out in sync with the chuffing on each engine set. You have your smoking whistle, which adding smoke fluid occurs right here underneath where the whistle mounts. The whistle, as we mentioned earlier, comes in its own separate bag. It mounts to the boiler with a magnet, so it holds itself in place. There's a piece here in the front and a wire here on the back that drop into holes, corresponding holes on the boiler. So you have smoke fluid to be added in the front stack, smoke fluid to be added in the rear stack, smoke fluid to be added under the whistle, and the fourth place to add smoke fluid is underneath the steam dome hatch, right here on the engineer side of the boiler towards the cab. This is the fourth smoke unit, which is used for the steam blowdown that comes out behind or beneath the cab. All of your switches are located on the top of the boiler. You have your depleting coal load, which you're able to move the coal as it's sitting stationary. You have a coal load on-off switch, as well as a volume adjustment underneath the two water hatches on the rear of the tender deck. The locomotive also features work lights down below the walkways. Those work lights will turn off automatically once the locomotive passes speed step 23. Comes with a coil coupler, the very slim line IR infrared drawbar, illuminated number boards, illuminated headlight, classification lights on the front of the boiler, operating marker lamps on the back of the tender, and an illuminated cab lamp. Now the cab lamp will turn off when the locomotive begins moving and will turn back on when the locomotive stops. Also included is this smoke shroud. The smoke shroud has a magnet in it, and this magnet is very important to its installation. The magnet helps keep the smoke shroud in place on the boiler casting, but it also turns off one smoke unit when the shroud is applied. This ensures that the locomotive does not exceed an acceptable operating temperature because of two smoke units running simultaneously in a shrouded space. So only one smoke unit will operate when the shroud is in place. To remove it, it's simply held on with a magnet. You have to make sure that magnet stays in the shroud so that the operating temperature of these smoke units does not exceed allowable limits. Once again, the whistle comes off, again held on with a magnet. You put your smoke fluid in that hole there. Also equipped with the locomotive is the engine memory module, which we'll show you how to load here momentarily, and the smoke fluid pipette used to load your smoke fluid. We do strongly recommend that you use the Lionel 6-37841 premium smoke fluid. This Vision Line Big Boy locomotive consumes smoke fluid at a rate that will blow your mind. So a couple of bottles are in order, and we'll discuss loading smoke fluid in just a moment. Your Vision Line Big Boy locomotive is equipped with a total of 5 switches, accessible underneath the steam dome on the top of the locomotive boiler. These 5 switches are program run position once the ID number has been assigned, program to assign the ID number in a command environment. For conventional operators, run allows all 3 cycles of the directional states, and program is your lockout. Your next switch is your Odyssey speed control system on-off. In the ODY position, your Odyssey 2 speed control is enabled. This will provide you with the smoothest operation of the locomotive through all 200 speed steps. In the no ODY position, Odyssey 2 is disabled. The next switch is your main smoke unit on-off switch. In the SMK position, both smoke units underneath the front 2 stacks are on. In the no SMK position, they are off. Next switch is your whistle smoke on-off. In the SMK position, it is on, and you will get smoke out from underneath the whistle when you activate it from the remote. No smoke means your whistle smoke is off. Your 5th switch is your blowdown smoke unit. In the SMK position, it's on, and in the no SMK position, it's off. You'll notice there's also a volume potentiometer in this space underneath the steam dome. That volume pod is used to set the volume of the soundboard that is inside the boiler of the locomotive. Your locomotive is equipped with 2 soundboards, one in the tender and one in the locomotive. Turning it clockwise will increase the volume, counterclockwise will decrease the volume. Finally, we have the steam blowdown smoke unit fill hole right here. In your steam dome cover, you'll notice that there's a rubber O-ring on the post that pushes down into that space. That's to keep the smoke from coming out the fill hole when the steam dome cap is placed back on the locomotive. On the top of the water deck of the tender, you also have 2 other user controllable features. One is the coal load motor on-off. To the left is in the on position, to the right is in the off position. Whenever the coal load is on, as the locomotive runs, the coal load will deplete over time depending upon the intensity of the chuff, the laboring of the chuffing, etc. You also have a manual volume control accessible in the rearmost water hatch. Turning this volume pot clockwise will increase the volume. Turning it counterclockwise will decrease the volume. This volume control is separate or independent from the sound system in the locomotive. So if you adjust this volume, you may very well want to adjust the volume in the boiler of the locomotive as well. Now before we get the locomotive on the track and actually show you all the features it has, one of the things that we strongly recommend that you do is a little bit of preventive maintenance to make sure that the locomotive has the proper lubrication it needs to be run hard on your layout. To do this, we recommend a oil applicator with a needle tip. And what we want to do is we want to apply a small drop of oil right here on the axle for the collector on both sides. Work that in with our finger. Do the same thing for the rear collector. Making sure not to get any oil on the collector roller surface itself. We also want to put a drop of oil on each axle where it goes into the bearing. It's a small drop is all that's necessary. We want to do that to the end of each axle, and also on the pivoting truck on the front of the tender, and so on. And then work that oil in by rotating the wheels. That'll help ensure that the tender isn't squeaking or squealing as we get it on the track and taking away from the operation of the locomotive. Now that the tender's been lubricated, we want to make sure that we lubricate the locomotive as well. It's important that we put a drop of oil on the collector axle on both sides. Work that in. Do that to the other 3 collectors on the locomotive. We want to put a drop of oil on the axle where it goes through the bearing in the frame. We want to do this to all 8 driver axles on both sides of the locomotive. Now this is a pretty big locomotive, but it does feature a non-locking gearbox. And what that means is you can take the wheels and you can rotate them around while it's laying flat on the surface. Get a good grip on it here so we're not stressing it. Do it from the back. And we can work that oil in. We also want to lubricate the drivers on the rear engine set. Again, just the axle where they go through the bearings in the frame itself. It's also a really good idea to put a drop of oil on the eccentric crank and the spacer, as well as on the side rod screws. And what this will do is this will help keep the locomotive from making any unwanted squeaks or squeals as it's running down the track. So a lot of axles on this locomotive. Recommend that you do this to all of the axles, both on the pilot truck, the trailing truck, and the drivers, to make sure that the preventative maintenance is out of the way. When we ship these locomotives, it's oftentimes difficult for us to lubricate this locomotive properly at the factory, because when you get it home, take it out of the packaging is dripping wet with oil. We do put protective oil coatings on all of these components before assembly, but typically it's a really good idea to do a little preventive maintenance and apply this oil before you put it on the tracks. Now before we get our big boy locomotive on the track, we need to first update our legacy remote with the memory module that came with the locomotive. To do this, we need to determine what ID number we're going to program the locomotive. Since our cab number is 4017, at Lionel we like to use the last 2 digits of the cab number as the engine ID. So we'll call it engine 17. So before we even put the locomotive on the track, fire up our legacy base and our remote, and we press engine 17 for engine 17. Then what we want to do is press the info button in the upper right hand corner, and we want to press the button underneath load where it says assign name. It tells us to insert the engine memory module, which is the memory module that we have for the big boy. So we open the cover in the top of the cab, insert the memory module, turn that back on. So we hit info, and now we hit load with the engine memory module inserted. It says Union Pacific 11438 Big Boy, number 4017, Load engine data? Yes. Now it tells us to remove the module. Takes us back to our engine screen, and what that's done for us is it's already assigned our name, it's set our type to steam, set our control to legacy mode, and it's set our sound to legacy rail sounds. To exit the engine menu, we simply press info again, and now here at the top of our screen we have Union Pacific Big Boy, and as you saw momentarily, the engine number popped up. So what did that do for us? Let me take you down to the touchpad and show you what exactly that's done. Okay, so the icons for our locomotive are in the number 1 position, volume up. In the number 2 position, crew talk. Number 3 position is the water fill sound. Number 4 position is volume down. The black circle is shutdown. When you turn the red throttle to get the engine moving, the black circle turns into a black triangle. That's emergency stop sequence. When you turn the throttle back down and stop the locomotive, it goes back to a black circle. The number 6 position is blow down. Press and hold this to get the blow down smoke effect from under the cab. The number 7 position is tower comm. Number 8 position is smoke off. Number 9 position is smoke on. Remember, when you're in the legacy mode, you have 3 levels of smoke: low, medium, and high. In this position here, it's looks like a lantern with an on symbol. That's the front locomotive classification lights on, the green lanterns on the front of the locomotive. And directly below it is off. So if you press the lantern with off, that'll actually turn off the class lights on the front of the locomotive, and the button above it will turn them back on. The number 0 position is engine reset. This position over here is Rule 17 lighting on, and right below it is Rule 17 lighting off. If we press the speed bar, the engine menu or the touchpad changes. We have our 6 preset railroad speeds: tower comm, smoke off, smoke on. This little bar graph here on the left is very important. We'll get to that in a moment. We still have, in the number 0 position, you'll see a number 1 there. That's roll speed. Roll speed is the very first speed step the locomotive will maintain consistently. Then we have the EFX up and the EFX down button. These two are very important keys in operating your big boy locomotive, because as you press EFX up, you'll notice this bar graph over here increases. With each time you press it, it continues to go up. Once that bar graph reaches all the way to the top, what you will see and hear in your locomotive is pretty impressive. As that bar graph reaches the top, the intensity of the chuffing of the locomotive will be as heavy as it can be. So it's going to make the loudest, most labored chuffing sound. In addition to that, it's also going to produce the most amount of smoke out of both smoke units, actually out of all 4 smoke units. As you press EFX down and that bar graph lowers, you'll hear a difference in the intensity of the chuffing. It will go from a very labored chuff to a very light, almost drifting type chuff. In addition to that dynamic change in the sounds, you'll also notice as you continue to run the engine that the smoke production will go down. And what this is doing is it's creating a really cool effect between the sound and the sight on the locomotive. At the same time, the more intense chuffing actually consumes fuel and water at a faster rate than it does when the chuffing is lighter. Now if we press the speed bar again, it'll take us back to our engine menu. When we first address the locomotive by pressing engine 1-7, we have a different set of icons. These icons here are the cab light on and cab light off. Same button, turns it off, turns it back on. We have the speed limit. This allows you to set the maximum speed that the locomotive will run regardless of how far you turn the red dial on the cab. We have the shut off icon, which again is the same as shut down. And we have the power button, which when you first address the engine 1.7, if you press this button, the sounds will start up. If you press and hold the button, you'll get a tower comm crew talk dialogue before the locomotive starts up. Later in the video, we'll talk about the wheel slippage sound. Really cool effect with the Vision Line Big Boy. While the wheels don't rotate quickly, there is a sound effect option that you can trigger at any time. And the way you do this is you apply your train brake full on so that the black line comes all the way across the screen. Turn the throttle to tell the locomotive to go, but the engine won't go because the train brake is set. So as soon as you release the train brake, you'll get that wheel slippage sound effect. Really cool piece on the Big Boy. Another cool feature for the Big Boy that we'll show you later in the video is the demo mode for the consuming or the depleting coal load effect. And the way that that's accomplished is you take the brake button, which pulling down is brake, pushing up is boost, pushing straight down is direction. If you simply grab the brake button and pull down, so the icon up here underneath engine 17 is a down arrow, what's actually going to occur on your locomotive as it's sitting stationary is the coal load will deplete right in front of your eyes. So as the coal load drops down, continues going down until it hits the bottom, and you must hold the brake button down in order to go through demo mode. Let off the brake button, and then the sequence will stop. The coal load will be depleted. To refill the coal, you simply press aux1 and then press and hold the R button. And you'll see up here under number 17 it says number 0. As long as you press and hold the R button until the coal loading sound starts, you can let off the R button. The locomotive will go through the entire sequence of refilling the coal in the bunker, and you'll see the coal load come back up to full once again. Now inside your engine, what that's doing is it's resetting your coal level that's consumed as your engine runs. And that'll become important later on when you use your Big Boy with your sensor track. Now before we get our locomotive on the track and running, we need to make sure that we add smoke fluid to all 4 smoke units on this Vision Line Big Boy. To do this, we're going to use the 6-37-841 Lionel Premium Smoke Fluid. We're going to take the cap off and use the pipette that came with the locomotive. Fill your pipette up so that the smoke fluid is at the 4th line from the tip. Then what we want to do is we want to put in 1 whole line worth of smoke fluid into the front stack, a full line of smoke fluid into the rear stack, remove the whistle, a full line worth of smoke fluid into the whistle itself, replace the whistle, and then finally the blowdown smoke unit, we want to add the last full line of smoke fluid. A full line of smoke fluid is roughly 15 to 20 drops out of the bottle. We really don't want to put in much more than that. And as you run your locomotive, depending upon the amount of smoke that you like, you can adjust that accordingly. If you run the smoke units a lot and burn through smoke fluid quickly, you can go ahead and add a few more extra drops, above 15 drops, 20 drops, 22 drops at the most. I wouldn't exceed anything more than 22 drops per refill. The smoke units are very reliable on these Vision Line Big Boys. You want to make sure that you don't overfill the smoke units with too much smoke fluid, because that ultimately falls back into the fan motor and into the electronics in the locomotive, and we really don't want to see these rolling in for foolish mistakes such as that. So once you have the smoke fluid added, it's a really good idea to blow down each one of the smoke fill holes with just a big puff of air out of your mouth. That way you can make sure you break any blockage in the smoke tubing, in the smoke unit tubing, and it'll also ensure that your smoke units fire up immediately upon power up. Next thing we need to do is put the program run switch in the program position and apply track power. What we're going to do is program our locomotive. To do this, we're going to use our legacy remote. But before we get started, I want to point out that the only thing that comes on at power up are the number boards on the front of the boiler. You'll notice that the headlight, the marker lamps, the work lamps underneath the running boards, the cab light, and the tender classification lamps are all dark. Now, the red marker on the top of the tender is illuminated, but the marker lamps on the back of the tender are off. So using our legacy remote, we're going to use the engine ID number of 17, which is the last 2 digits of the cab number. We're simply going to press engine, 1, 7, and then the set button. The whistle confirms that the locomotive took the command. Now all we need to do is put the program run switch back in run. We want to make sure that the other 4 switches are all in the on position, which on our locomotive it is. We want to be sure to replace the steam dome cover. We want to give a little extra push back here in the corner to make sure that your blowdown smoke unit fill hole is covered up. Otherwise you'll have smoke leaking out around the top of your steam dome when you activate your blowdown steam. Now that the locomotive is programmed to engine 17, we can run through some of the basic features. So to turn on your smoke unit, simply press aux 1 and the smoke on icon 3 times on your legacy remote. On the top of my remote it says smoke high. At this point the smoke units are on, and all I really need to do to get the smoke units working is start running the locomotive. This is a great example of how smoke fluid is blocking that stack. What we're going to do is blow down that stack real quick, and you'll see that the smoke unit starts producing smoke. You'll notice that each stack, because it's powered by a separate smoke unit, puffs in sync with its driver set. Forwardmost stack with the front drivers, rearmost stack with the rear engine set. Go ahead and blow the whistle. Once again, another great example of smoke fluid blocking the hole. Just pull off the whistle, give a quick blow of air down the stack, and you're good to go. Not unlikely for it to take a few seconds to warm up. Just lay on the whistle, it'll come out. Go ahead and shut off the stack smoke so that you can see that smoke is in fact coming out of the whistle. And then your steam blowdown effect, this is accomplished by pressing aux 1 and holding down what would be the number 6 location on the touchpad. like to remove this cover so you can see what happens when this seal is not properly made. You get smoke that comes out of your filter. Now, as you're running your Vision Line Big Boy and you want it to produce more smoke, this is all feasible using the 32 different levels of chuff, or intensities of chuff, that this locomotive offers. What I'm going to do is go ahead and turn the overall volume down so that you can hear me over the locomotive and hear the change in the intensity of the chuffing. The way that you increase your smoke production in your locomotive is by increasing the labor effect of the sound system. This is accomplished underneath the speed bar menu, and in the lower right hand corner of your speed bar touchpad, you have two icons. One is an up arrow and the other is a down arrow. If you press the up arrow all the way, press it continually, until the bar graph on the far left side of the up arrow is all black. That is the most intense laboring chuff that the locomotive itself will have. This in turn means that it's going to consume coal and water in the tender at the fastest rate as well. But what you'll notice is that your smoke units will produce more smoke at the top end of your laboring chuff than it will at the bottom end of your chuffing, where it's more of a drifting, non-laborious chuff sound. So let's go ahead and get the locomotive running a little more. Press the EFX down button, which is going to allow you to hear the change in the dynamic of the sound system, specifically regarding the chuffing, and it's also going to affect the smoke production in this locomotive. Here we go. This is what your chuffing sounds like on the bottom of that decreased labor. Now we're going to go ahead and bring the locomotive to a stop using the brake button. One of the really cool features of your Vision Line Big Boy is the wheel slippage sound. And the way that you achieve wheel slippage is you apply the train brake full on, you turn the throttle to tell the locomotive to move, but the train brake is set so the locomotive doesn't move. Then you release the train brake and you get the sound effect of wheel slippage. And it works like this. Train brake is applied again, throttle still up, and release the train brake. Your quilling whistle. Bell. Tower com. Now, as many of you are likely aware, the Visionland Big Boy comes with the first ever depleting coal load feature ever released on a 3-rail locomotive in this industry. The depleting coal load works as the locomotive runs around your layout, and the rate in which it consumes that coal and the water in your tender is primarily based on the intensity of the chuffing of the sound system. There is, however, a demo mode that will allow you to show off the depleting coal load while the locomotive is sitting stationary. The way that you achieve that is that you simply press and hold, or pull and hold, the brake button on the legacy cab. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. If you'll keep your eye on the coal load, you'll notice that that starts to go down as you continue to apply the brake on the remote. In order for this effect to occur, you must continue holding down the brake button on the legacy remote. Once you release the brake button, the effect will stop. To refill the coal in the coal tender, you simply press aux1 and then the reset key, or what would be the 0 position on the touchpad. If you hold down the reset position, or reset button, you will hear coal start falling into the bunker. Letting off the reset button, once you start hearing the coal fall into the bunker, it will continue filling the coal bunker until it's full. This sound will continue to play until the coal bunker is full. What's actually happening inside your locomotive is it's resetting the coal and water levels inside the electronics of your locomotive. These coal and water levels are realized on your legacy cab when you use your sensor track in conjunction with operating your legacy Big Boy. Up on the touchpad of your legacy remote, under the speed menu, you'll see a fuel and a water meter that measures the amount of coal and water that the locomotive is consuming as you operate it. What's really neat about it is as that coal and water is consumed, the tower comm and crew talk in your locomotive change in conjunction with the amount of coal and water that you're consuming. It's a really cool effect. Now, we just simply reloaded the coal, we need to reload water. So to do this, we press the aux1 key, and the round wheel that's in the upper right-hand corner of our touchpad, or what would be the number 3 position. If you press and hold that icon, you'll hear the water spout turn over to the tender, and water start being added to your tender. This sound will play as long as you hold down that icon. Once you release it, you'll get this message.
My water's full. Over. Roger that. 4017. Out.
Earlier in the video, we talked about the work lights that are illuminated here underneath the walkways. Those work lights will actually turn off once the locomotive crests speed step 21 into speed step 22. Works like this. We're at speed step 20 now, 21, into 22, and your work lights turn off automatically. As we slow the locomotive down, the work lights come back on. We stop the locomotive, and the cab light comes on. Of course, the round circle in the center of your touchpad, the black round circle, is the shutdown icon. This is the sound effect you'll get when you shut the locomotive down.
Going to sign the register book, dispatcher. 4017 out.
And the locomotive shuts down.